Well, extend to you all a very warm welcome for this evening's first presentation in Series 2 of the History and Heritage Group's Histories of Our Oldest Lodges. And I would repeat what Charles asked earlier, please remain muted. I'd now like to offer a very warm welcome indeed to Brother Alexander Moncrief, Master of Lord Scone in Perth, number 3, who will shortly undertake his presentation on the history of number 3. Before that, however, I want to offer a very special welcome to our Grand Master Mason, Brother Ramsay McGee, who's joined us again this evening. As he has done for all the previous presentations, we very much appreciate his presence and his support of the History and Heritage Group's activities. Thank you, sir. Delighted to have you with us as always. Thank you. I'll introduce just 2 or 3 others, if I may, members of the History and Heritage Group who are available this evening. 1 or 2 aren't. They're away enjoying a bit of a break. However, I'm delighted that Charles Winson, the Secretary of the group, is with us this evening. Thank you, Charles, for arranging the technicalities of this evening. Yourself and Gordon Meekie, tremendous technicians with this high-flying media stuff, so very much appreciated. Besides yourself, Charles, and Gordon Meekie, we have Dr. Douglas Nichol, Provincial Grand Master of Aberdeenshire East, all members of the History and Heritage Group, and a delight to have them all with us here this evening. Well, as always, our presentations will be recorded. You'll be able to view it tomorrow if you miss any of it this evening for any reason, or if you'd like to mention to others who are not able to be with us this evening, that will be available tomorrow. Following Alexander's presentation, there will be a question and answering session. But if you do have any questions, please put them into the chat box so that they can be addressed by Charles at the end of the presentation. Charles can then introduce those various questions, and I'm sure we'll get some sound answers from Brother Alexander Moncrief. I would now like to invite Grand Master Mason, Brother Ramsay McGee, if you'd be good enough, please, sir, to introduce our speaker, Brother Alexander Moncrief. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, John, and could I extend a very, very warm welcome to each and every one of you. It's a delight to see that we've got over 60 for this, the first of the second series of presentations. It's very encouraging indeed. Tonight's speaker will be well known to many of you. Over the past few years as Junior and Senior Grand Warden, he's been a very prominent and popular member of the Grand Lodge team, going out to do various bits and pieces. He has been the Master of Lodge Scone in Perth on 2 occasions, and currently is the second one. But his mother lodge is not Scone in Perth. Alexander was initiated into the Citizen Lodge, number 2911 in London, back in 1997. And he was the master of that lodge from 2005 to 2006. And he's also a member of another lodge in London, but it's got very Scottish connotations, and that's the Duke of Fife Lodge, number 2345 in London. Alexander eventually affiliated to his Scottish Lodge, Scone in Perth, number 3, and he took the chair, first of all, from 2016 to 2018, and again in 2019 until the present time. Excuse me. Oh, go away. Very persistent, whoever it is. Shut up. No, they're just not going to go. Sorry about that, apologies. His first office in Grand Lodge was that of the Junior Grand Deacon, a position that he took up in 2017. And as I've mentioned, he's already, at the moment, he's the Senior Grand Warden. But he's doing a very, very important job in the proxy setup that we have in Grand Lodge. This is going to go out the window just any minute now. As you will all be aware, we've got proxy Grand Masters all over the place. But for all the lodges that report directly to Grand Lodge, we've never had any such thing. And Alexander is now fulfilling that position and doing it exceedingly well. So it gives me great pleasure indeed, as the first speaker in this series, to introduce to you Alexander Charles Graham Monteith, Right Worshipful Master of Lodge Scone in Perth, number 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Grandmaster Mason, for that fine introduction. That telephone call, I think, was your wife telling you to bring in a loaf and a pint of milk. You will regret not having answered it. Brother Alexander Monteith, we look forward very much to your presentation this evening, and sir, the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your introduction, and to your secretary and all the members of the History and Heritage Group for allowing the Lodge to participate in this, the first of the second series of lectures. And now that the Grandmaster Mason is back off his telephone, I can also say, Grandmaster, thank you very much indeed for your extremely kind introduction. We were in a state of high excitement here today because the Grandmaster Mason's actually been in Edinburgh today doing some work, and we thought he might come and do his welcome here in our premises at Lodge Scone in Perth, number 3, on his way back up to Fortrose, but he got all his work done and sped north, and there he is, I hope, with a dram sitting at his desk. But Brother McGee, thank you very, very much indeed for your extremely kind introduction. It's great to see so many people here. Thank you for joining me for this presentation. It's particularly nice to see a brother from one of our Chilean lodges who's attending this evening. Now, when the chairman rang me and asked me about doing a presentation, he was extremely reassuring and comforting, and basically said, you know, we could do what we wanted. He didn't say he was unstable, as he said tonight, but we hope that his stability can at least remain with us until the end of this presentation. So the format of this is in 3 parts. The first part will cover the history of Lodge Scone in Perth, number 3 as we know it, much of it being taken from the published book by Crawford Smith in 1896, entitled History of the Ancient Lodge of Scone in Perth. The second part will provide information on the various buildings in which we have met. And the third part will cover the recent successes the Lodge has had in attracting and retaining new members. This last part is, of course, recent history, but it is important to highlight, as without a future, the Lodge cannot create any new history, or indeed even survive and continue to celebrate its more ancient history. This presentation isn't trying to prove anything, and is simply information on our Lodge history as we know and understand it. The facts are presented without any challenge or spirit of competition to any of the other ancient Scottish lodges who've already made their presentations via the History and Heritage Group, nor indeed to those other ancient lodges who are to bring their presentations to this forum at some future point. I'd like to thank Brother David Robertson, who's over my left shoulder, who's a past master of the Lodge, for not only bringing the presentation together, but also for his technical assistance in writing and working the PowerPoint presentation, which you'll see in addition to this narrative. And I may well be asking David to assist me with answering some questions at the end. I'd also like to thank my 2 wardens, who have been a huge help in the preparation as well. The Brethren of Lodge Scone in Perth initially neither joined nor recognised the authority of the Grand Lodge of Scotland when it was established in 1736. However, Brother Gideon Shaw, an affiliate of our lodge from the then Lodge of Journeymen in Edinburgh, and the master of our lodge in 1740 to 1744, was instrumental in changing the mind of the lodge regarding the joining of the Grand Lodge in Edinburgh. Being both an Edinburgh Mason and the master of number 3, he was probably able to use his position to influence the views of the lodge members with regard to coming under the umbrella of the new overall governing body. Consequently, a petition for membership was signed by the master of the lodge and his wardens on the 1st of April 1742, and the following month Brother Shaw travelled to Edinburgh and submitted the petition for membership to the Grand Lodge of Scotland, and in doing so handed over the Lodge's oldest document, which is entitled The Mutual Agreement and dated 1658. To confirm the age of our Lodge, the Grand Lodge of Scotland, in line with their policy of accepting a Lodge's oldest document as proof of age, found the mutual agreement to be suitable proof and approved the petition for membership. The Lodge was granted a charter of confirmation, acknowledging its existence prior to 1658. It's unfortunate to note that a huge amount of Lodge records have been lost in recent years, mainly due to the floods in Perth in 1993, but also due to a bizarre and inexplicable fact that many of the photographs were thrown over the old bridge by a past master within living memory, who decided to tidy up many of the photographs held in the Lodge premises. We're extremely fortunate that the Perth Library are happy to take and store our records, and we're very keen not to have any reenactments of bridge throwing episodes. It is worth taking a few moments to put the settlements of Scone and Perth into the historical context of Scotland, and noting that the spelling of Scone has varied over many centuries, with the current spelling of the village being different to the spelling in many ancient documents, as well as our own Lodge name. In 843 AD, King Kenneth MacAlpine fought a battle in the vicinity of Scone and successfully united the two kingdoms of the Scots and the Picts. He moved the Stone of Fate, or coronation stone, to Scone, which he had made his capital. In later times, several parliaments were held at Scone, and in 1115, King Alexander I founded the Abbey of Scone. In 1124, King David I succeeded his father and granted a charter to Perth. During his long reign, he founded and erected a great number of churches, cathedrals and abbeys throughout Scotland. It is thought that he built or rebuilt St John's Kirk in Perth, which is the city's oldest building. While Scone remained a royal residence and the place where the Scottish kings were crowned, Perth became the capital of Scotland. In 1437, King James I was murdered in Perth, and the royal court of the King James II, aged 7, moved to Edinburgh. The Lodge's oldest artefacts date from around the year 1500 and consist of two wooden effigies of an ecclesiastical design, which would have been attached to pews or a rood screen. Due to their lack of provenance, it is not known whether they originate either from St John's Kirk or Scone Abbey, or have possibly come from somewhere else. Like many of the ancient lodges of Scotland, our lodge has a traditional history, this being based on the contents of the Mutual Agreement of 1658. This document states that the lodge was founded in Scone on or about the year 1193, and that their predecessors, and I paraphrase here, one uniform community and union throughout the world, gave rise to the temple in Kilwinning, and then further temples throughout the land, of which the Abbey and Lodge of Scone was placed as the second lodge within the land. Scone Abbey was founded between 1114 and 1122, and our traditional history presumes that our predecessors were the stonemasons who built Scone Abbey. The writer in 1658 also expresses the opinion that the brethren at that time, that their lodge was second in the land, giving precedence to the Lodge of Kilwinning, who gave rise to the Temple of Kilwinning, founded between 1162 and 1188. Unfortunately, we have no written records from the 12th to the 15th centuries, authenticating the accuracy of the claim regarding our foundation date, and we must therefore leave it to the historians to argue the case. The Milne family should be mentioned in this presentation, as in the period of 1550 to 1657, all the masters of the lodge came from this family. These brethren also served as master masons to the various reigning sovereigns over that time. The Mutual Agreement tells us that a John Milne I, a master mason to the king, was the first known master of the Lodge of Scone around 1550, holding the post for life, as was the custom at the time. His son, John Milne II, succeeded him as Master Mason to King James VI and Master of the Lodge at Scone, we are informed in the mutual agreement that James VI, by his own desire, was entered freeman, mason, and fellow crafter of Lodge of Scone by John Milne Secundus. The Milne family continued their connection to the Lodge as masters for 3 generations until the death of John Milne III in 1657. Prior to his death, he surrendered some of his Edinburgh properties to his eldest son, also John Milne IV. John Milne IV had been making a name for himself in Edinburgh and was master mason to Charles I and II. He was a member of the Lodge of Edinburgh Mary's Chapel, of which he took the chair 10 times. His memorial in Edinburgh reads, 6th Master Mason of the family of Milne. This, of course, refers to his being Master Mason to the King rather than any reference to ties with Masonic lodges. It's pleasing to know that the Lodge of Edinburgh and Lodge Scone and Perth still hold close ties to this day, all these centuries later. King James VI made a state visit to Perth on the 15th of April 1601, on which occasion he was made a burgess of the town and provost at the Market Cross, and signed the Guild Book Jacobus Rex. At this time, we think that the king was entered into the lodge at 34 years old, as detailed in the mutual agreement, and there is an interesting depiction of this event, which we will look at on the north wall of the lodge later on in the presentation. It's worth noting that the mutual agreement, the head of the lodge, in the mutual agreement, the head of the lodge is called the master. Within other lodges in Scotland at this time, around 1658, the name given to the head of the lodge was Deacon or Warden. We can understand why the head of our lodge was designated master, as they were master masons of the king. It is our understanding that this is the first use of the designation master for the head of a lodge in Scotland. Master is first used in the Lodge of Edinburgh in 1727 and by the Lodge of Kilwinning in 1735. The earliest written reference to masons of Scone, of which we are aware, is recorded in King James IV Treasurer's account books on the 11th of October 1504, and then later in the 1569 Writing Corporation Perth Minute Book, stating that the Freemasons have been debarred from being chosen deacons of the Writing Corporation. In 1600, there was a convention at the lodges St Andrews, called by order of Warden General, who was a Crown officer. The minutes of the Lodge of Edinburgh tell us that the Lodge of St Andrews was charged to attend, and the masters of Perth and Dundee were warranted to convene. As there were no other known Masonic organisations in Perth at the time, it's assumed that this must refer to our lodge. In 1652, during the Civil War, Cromwell took control of Perth and demolished many houses to give materials to the building of a great citadel on the South Inch, on the outskirts of Perth, with hundreds of families being rendered homeless. Perhaps this would account to some extent for the lack of written lodge records surviving. In 1739, the Wright Corporation of Perth rescinded their ban on freeman masons holding office, and a year later, Brother James Cranby, trade mason and master of Lodge Scone and Perth, was elected Deacon of the Wrights Corporation. He was the first mason to be elected Deacon of the Wrights Corporation since 1569. In 1741, the first mention of the degree of Master Mason is minuted, whereby Brother Captain Leake, a brother from Lodge Kilwinning, visited Lodge Scone and Perth and gave full satisfaction that he was a Master Mason. In 1745, there is no mention in the Lodge minutes of the Jacobite rebellion taking place, but there were only 4 meetings of that year and with very short minutes. During the 1745 uprising, Bonnie Prince Charlie brought his forces into Perth. When they left, Provost James Creed, a member of our lodge who lived in the upper flat of the Wrights and Corporation building, was taken hostage to ensure Perth paid the monetary penalty issued by the Jacobites. The following year, Provost Creed was elected as master of the lodge and remained master until his death in 1758. Following his death, his widow presented a china punch bowl to the lodge, which is displayed in our lodge room, lodge museum. Mrs. Cree's father was the Reverend Alexander McCreef of Calfargy, of whom I am a direct descendant. In 1778, we know that the Lodge worked other degrees, as seen in the minutes of Edinburgh Royal Arch Chapter number 1, and I quote, "This day the compliment of 6 sundry steps in masonry were offered to the office bearers of St. Stephen's Lodge by sundry of the brethren from the ancient lodge of Perth and Scone. They all accepted the compliment of the degree called past the chair. Then in December of that year, this night being set apart by the brethren of Perth and Scone Lodge in order to confer upon the office bearers of St. Stephen's Lodge the following degrees in masonry, namely excellent and super excellent master, arch, royal arch masons, and lastly, knights of Malta." In reference to our own lodge minute books, the oldest one we know of commences in 1725. The lodge was not comprised only of operative masons at that time, although largely so, because at one meeting they admitted a teacher, a writer, and the butcher. The early minutes do not state where the annual and quarterly meetings were held. The committee or smaller meetings were usually held in different houses and inns. From the fact that in 1739 the lodge voted to have a chair made to be put in the Wrights Trade Hall. This chair was returned to the lodge in 1969. There can be little doubt that the larger meetings were held there. The Wrights Hall was built in 1725 and is situated in the Watergate, then the most genteel street in Perth. Lord Scone in Perth gifted the Roman Doric pilastered and broken pediment doorpiece to the Wrights Incorporation, which carries the date 1725, and this door gave access to the Wrights Hall on the first floor. We know that our meetings were held in the Wrights Hall in 1741, as it is mentioned in our minutes. We learn from the minute that the Wrights Incorporation, that on the 30th of September in 1748, the Wrights ordered an elbow chair for their hall. This was made to match the chair gifted by us in 1739, and was the Wrights Deacon chair. The two chairs sat by side until 1969, when the Mason's chair was returned to our lodge, when the Wrights Hall was sold, and the Deacon's chair was given to Perth Museum. In 1831, the lodge took out a lease on the commercial hall on Perth High Street and subsequently bought it in 1837 for £210 and continued to meet there until 1933. The lodge then bought the Georgian townhouse at 5 Apple Crescent and built a lodge room on the rear of the building, which was consecrated on the 4th of March 1933, where the lodge still remains today. The last meeting that we held here, prior to the lockdown from COVID-19, was held on the same consecration date of the 4th of March, albeit in 2020, when we passed 2 of our entered apprentices to the Fellowcraft degree. The murals of the newly constructed temple were commissioned to be painted by a professional artist, Brother Thomas Hutchison Peddy, and designed to give symbolic vision to the traditions and spirit of Freemasonry. Brother Peddy was admitted and entered apprentice to the lodge in 1931, and almost immediately commenced the preliminary planning in connection with the murals. And I quote, "In these decorations, no effort was made to interfere with the artist's conception, and he was guided and advised by the elder members of the craft in order that no canon of our mysteries should be disturbed in the slightest degree." Here we quote from an article written shortly afterwards. "His lovely panels in the Masonic temple have revealed his genius as an artist, to all privileged to see them." Our story of the murals and the history of the lodge begins on the west wall with the visit of King Alexander I visiting Scone Abbey after a hunting trip, which we will come on to shortly. Moving in a clockwise direction, onto the north wall, the frieze depicts a series of masons whose costumes change with the passing centuries from 1114 to 1933. They are handing down the emblems of the craft through the years before an archangel who in each alternate panel holds the sands of time balanced with the flaming sword of truth. In 1982, due to damp ingress, the last of these panels depicting the dress code of present-day masons was damaged in the northeast corner of the lodge room. One of our brothers, Gary Gibb, a young mason at the time, but now a past master and the oldest member of the lodge, painted a completely new mural. It is the only mural in the lodge room that does not bear Brother Tom Petty's mason's mark, but it is an excellently executed piece of work, and of course contains Brother Gibb's own mark. His piece reminds us of this generation that we have a duty to those who follow to maintain and improve that which we have been so freely given by our forefathers. On the east wall behind me, the mystical idea of Freemasonry is depicted in the impressive mural 18 feet long and 6 feet high. The supplicant, naked and utterly without possessions, on a barren crag in the foreground, curving the contour of the earth's rim, showing dimly in the distance. The figure is kneeling with his back to the lodge, his arms outstretched in supplication, bowing before the all-seeing eye of God, in the double equilateral triangle, and the whole is surrounded by a glory of light in the sky. In the cloud formations, there are four figures which symbolize the elements of earth, air, fire, and water, withdrawing, as it were, before the intensity of the supplicant's plea to disclose it to the glory of God. Along the entire frieze of the south wall run 10 panels telling a Masonic story and depicting the character in our Masonic teachings. And there you see a selection of these panels. Two of these panels can be seen above the south wall mural, showing King Solomon alighting with his court at the completion of his great temple. Around the cove of the entire lodge room, there are four connecting panels. In the east, Phoebus Apollo, the Greek name for the god of the sun, is in his golden chariot as seen rising in the morning mists. In the south, as can be seen above the large mural of King Solomon, Phoebus Apollo and his fiery team are at their loftiest and at a momentary level, racing flatly across the meridian before beginning their descent, and are seen plunging into a vault of light, with the clouds gathering around them on the west wall. Balancing this on the north wall, a panel depicts Jacob's ladder with the traditional figures of faith, hope, and charity. And connecting these panels and running round the cove, as you can see at the moment, is a band of significant ornaments in which the symbols of our Masonic craft are depicted. The west wall depicts King Alexander I, inspecting the works during the construction of the Abbey, of Scone Abbey. These impressive panels in triptych show a wealth of Masonic symbolism, such as an entered apprentice displaying a tracing board for the king and the master of the lodge, and the very visible square and compasses, and the operative masons shaping the stone. And here on the left, you can just see a Templar Knight. Moving around to the north wall, we see an impressive portrayal of King James VI undergoing a ceremony in the lodge. There we are. Discounting my father and grandfather, James VI is my 11 times great-grandfather, which is my only known ancestral connection to our lodge, albeit a rather tenuous one. History doesn't provide us with the names of the shadowy figures in the background of the painting, but we've always understood that they are the faces of the various lodge members when the mural was painted in the 1930s. Each figure possesses a very different facial feature painted by the artist, and so this theory, we feel, is likely to be correct. In 1930, perhaps the outstanding feature of the Masonic year was the unveiling of and dedication of a Masonic memorial window at St John's Kirk for the Brethren of Perthshire who fell in the Great War. It's worth viewing as and when the church is accessible. One of our distinctive features of our lodge room are the unique number 3 chairs made by the outgoing master, Brother Thomas Ower, who was master in 1832, a Wright by trade, and for the office bearers of the lodge, these chairs were made, when all but the master and his warden sat on wooden forms. Today, 3 of these chairs are positioned on either side of the master's chair in the east of the lodge, and the other 2 are used for the deacon's chairs. Beautiful they may be, but comfortable they are not. And for those of
he's got me as a son. What more can you ask for?
And for those of you who've sat in the east of this lodge, you'll know that these chairs are very uncomfortable. David, have we got a picture of that? Thank you very much. Also shown in the lodge room is the matriculation certificate from the Court of the Lord Lion, King of Arms, recorded in the register on the 24th of March, 1958. It gives the lodge the legal right to wear our lodge crest, which we do on our lodge aprons. The crest is divided into 2. On the right-hand side is the arms of the Grand Lodge of Scotland. On the top left-hand side, the old-style crown, an ermine-covered triangle which represents Moot Hill, situated near Scone Palace, which was the site used for the coronation of Scottish kings, and thus recording the lodge's royal connections. Beneath and on the left is a stylized heraldic double-headed eagle, the old coat of arms of the city of Perth. The lodge room and lavatories form the 1930s part of our building at 5 Apple Crescent, and so construction is relatively recent, but the remaining part of the building was constructed in 1798, and so is of Georgian design. We're fortunate to have some interesting artefacts in our museum. Many of the original features of the building are still in place, and so there is a slow but steady restoration process taking place to ensure that we preserve or restore, where possible, the interior of our beautiful building as best we can. Up to the 1950s, the internal decoration was overseen by Mackay's, who were a firm of Perth decorators. Within the last 2 years, the lodge has re-engaged Mackay's, and earlier this year, they were carrying out the redecoration of the lodge refectory located on the first floor. One of the company's directors, whilst working on site, uncovered an unfinished mural painted directly onto the refectory wall plasterwork. On the mural, in pencil, was an illegible signature, and written underneath was for H. Mackay in 1932. If we've got a copy of that mural there, that would be great. We can only assume that this mural was in a tradesman's signature applied before the area was papered over, and the lodge bought the building. However, we're unsure whether the unfinished mural was started for the lodge at the time, there it is, or whether it was from a much earlier period. And there you can see the rather illegible signature of the tradesman before he put the paper on. The much admired and beautiful stained glass window in the upstairs refectory, we could have that there, was a gift from to the lodge from Brother Donald McIntosh, then resident in Canada. This window is a special exhibit of Hugh McCulloch and Company for the 1901 Empire exhibition at Kelvin Grove. The 4 panels that are on show upstairs are reversed to partly conceal a bad crack in one of them. and there is one or possibly two panels missing from the piece. The work of art depicts the crowning of King Robert Bruce as King of Scots by Bishop William de Lambton, the Bishop of Glasgow, at Scone in 1306. The first we hear of our Tyler's peculiar style of dress was on the 13th of September in 1819. There it is recorded the lodge took into consideration the propriety of their having a dress in the Turkish style for the officer. The treasurer, along with a committee, are appointed to get the dress done in a masterly style, and that as moderate as possible. This brings us to the mannequin in the Lodge Museum, given to the Lodge in 1985. And this mannequin is a compromise of the two styles of Turkish dress that we have a photographic record of, which you can see as you leave the Lodge at either side of the entrance to the Lodge room. The last record of this uniform of our Tyler being used is in the Lodge inventory of 1903. So moving on to the final part of the presentation is to just discuss very briefly the successes that this Lodge has had in attracting and retaining new members. And I think it is an important part of our recent history, so I would like to talk about it. When I affiliated to Lodge Scone in Perth at the end of 2009, I was 42 years old and the third youngest member of the Lodge. There were few candidates being initiated and no policy to attract candidates other than optimistic hope that candidates would appear. In 2013, the then master of the Lodge, Brother David Robertson, our technical wizard behind me here, addressed the members and drew their attention that unless something was done about the lack of new members, the Lodge could not survive, and certainly not in its current premises. Lodge Canongate Kilwinning No. 2 had recently held some open days in Edinburgh, which had raised the public profile of the Lodge and attracted some good quality candidates, and they were kind enough to share their experiences with us. As a result of their advice, and the advice of other lodges at home and abroad, the Lodge decided to hold an open day devoted entirely to educating people about Freemasonry, and with the hope of attracting candidates. For many years, the Lodge participated in the annual Perth Heritage Doors Open Day, where many historic buildings in Perth had opened their doors to the public. Sadly, this practice had not attracted a single applicant to our Lodge, and so the new format was to be entitled Freemasons Lodge Open Day. It was important that we had to change the culture of thinking amongst the members with regards to branching out and trying something new. Having a different catchment area from Lodge Canongate and Kilwinning in Edinburgh, we felt as an advantage of having our Lodge building in a very public position, attracting a great deal of passing vehicular and pedestrian traffic. As a result of this, a huge banner was made and put up outside the building, and we awaited the date of the open day. Soon after opening our doors on the allotted day, a young couple entered the building, and having been married on the previous day, and were on their way to celebrate their honeymoon in the Highlands. Having been looking on Facebook to see if there were any new photos of their recent wedding, the gentleman saw an advert for our open day and was urged by his new wife to make inquiries, as he had always had an interest in Freemasonry, but never knew how to go about making these inquiries. I'm delighted to say that this gentleman is now our brother and our very competent junior deacon. We've discovered time and again that there are genuinely suitable gentlemen who have an interest in the craft, but who have never known a reliable way to approach anyone, or who did not believe much of what has been written on the internet. With all of our applicants, we've made every effort to inform them of what the craft is about, urge them to do their own researches on reliable websites, such as the Grand Lodge of Scotland and the United Grand Lodge of England websites, and also carefully receive references from reliable sources to ensure that the applicants were of suitable character to join our Lodge. Informal chats and interviews have been combined with invitations to Lodge socials and post-meeting harmonies, as well as attending our basement bar on Saturday evenings, when it's been open. Attracting new candidates is not difficult, but it is extremely time-consuming and requires dedication to ensure that the applicants are of good character, and suitable as future members of our worldwide organisation. We've never rushed any candidates into joining, and the process generally takes about a year, although sometimes longer. Just a very quick word about retention. We've had a very high rate of retention of our new members by ensuring they feel fully informed as to what is going on both inside and outside the lodge meetings, as well as pointing out the relevance of Freemasonry to modern day society before they join. We encourage them to feel involved and invested in the lodge and thus enthused. Gone is the tradition of putting candidates through 3 degrees in 6 weeks, and the minimum period is now extended to 6 months, although it is more likely to take a year. Whenever newer members have to retire from a meeting, they are always accompanied by a more senior brother who will then hold a tutorial on different aspects of Freemasonry in order to keep the member informed on as many levels as possible. Our mentoring program has been greatly assisted by the chairman of the History and Heritage Group, Brother John Miller, who's been extremely generous in sharing his own lodge's mentoring program with us. The aftercare of new entrants into the lodge is hugely important to us, and we know that retention is a challenge within Freemasonry in general. We felt that this retention rate could be greatly increased, and we have lost very few of our applicants and candidates as a result. The members of the lodge have been hugely supportive in the drive to attract and retain members, and it's through this hard work that we've built up a young and enthusiastic membership who are enjoying the Masonic experience and forming the basis for a surviving and thriving unit. One of the ways of celebrating our lodge is by maintaining a responsible, visible and current social media profile. And this in itself attracts non-Masons to look at what we are doing and be attracted towards us. No further details are required other than to say that we are more than happy to share our successes with other lodges, many of which can attract candidates by following the same simple procedures. We could boast a high figure of 50% of our regularly attending members being under the age of 40 years old. We feel we have a bright future as a lodge and are happy to assist others to do the same, so that our wonderful Scottish lodges can continue into a world where there is so much uncertainty on so many levels. Thank you very much indeed.
Alexander, may I, on behalf of all assembled here this evening, thank you for a very interesting and informative presentation on the history of Scone and Perth number 3, and for a wonderful tour of your superb premises. Absolutely excellent. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. The time spent in your preparation was time well spent. I'm sure the Brethren assembled would agree with that. You mentioned the mentoring program that came from Renfrewshire East, and you mentioned my name with it. I would like just to make it clear that there were any number of brethren within the province of Renfrewshire East who were active contributors to that mentoring program. It wasn't all down to John Miller, I can assure you. But thank you very much for the mention of Renfrewshire East's assistance in that particular aspect of your lodge's excellent work. Can I now just ask Brother Charles Winston if he would care to field the questions, some of which I hope are in the chat box, or he might open it to the floor. Thank you, Charles.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Brother Alexander, firstly, can I say that you've absolutely delighted us this evening with a wonderful history. I don't have any questions in the chat room, but I do have a couple of questions, Brother Alexander. You mentioned John Milne II as Master Mason to James VI. Can you tell us whether he predated William Shaw, or did he come after Shaw's time?
I really should have perhaps given you a brown envelope, Charles, to ensure that you didn't ask me such a complicated question to somebody who is not a historian. And I have to say that when I gave a little credit to David Robertson at the beginning, all of the historical facts that he's collated were collated by David rather than by me. I'm not sure whether David is able to answer that. I'm terribly sorry. I'm afraid I can't answer that, Charles.
Okay, well, I have another question for you. You mentioned the mutual agreement. Can you tell me, a mutual agreement is usually between at least two parties, so who were the parties to the mutual agreement?
It's basically a mutual agreement of a whole group of individuals, and that's what they called it. I guess it was an agreement of all the individuals of the lodge at the time, that statement was, to their knowledge, correct.
I have a question from...
The mutual agreement was an agreement between the...
Sorry, Charles, just a technical issue here, David. I think you can come down. Yeah.
The mutual agreement was between the Masons of Perth, the lodge members, and it governed items like they weren't to steal each other's apprentices, and it was an agreement between the working Masons, telling them how they should cooperate with each other. And one of the clauses was that they shouldn't poach work from each other. They couldn't take another. And if they did, the Masons who was working that job had to be paid in full and agree that he didn't wish to continue. So it was an agreement.
Sorry, David, we're getting some feedback from your other computer. I don't know if it's muted or not.
Did you get most of that, Charles?
Yes, I did. It sounds very much like the mutual agreement was very much an earlier version, perhaps, of the Shaw statutes, because they dealt with similar issues. I don't know if anyone else would like to comment on that. I have a question in the chat room. Did Petty make his living as an artist, and if so, does your lodge own any of his other artwork?
He was a professional artist, and he married a Perth girl, and I think he was in his 50s or 60s when he actually joined the lodge, and he did most of his work in London. Difficulty with the artwork here is that they are painted onto plaster, so or the canvases have been stuck straight on the plaster, so they could never probably be moved. There are one or two other pictures of him, by him. Again, they are on canvas, which has just been stuck straight on the plaster. So there's not very much information on him, actually. He's quite tricky to find information on, but a lot of his work was in churches. So we've got these paintings here. We've got a self-portrait of him, and then there is what probably was a very impressive painting on the first floor, but unfortunately it's been hugely light damaged and probably smoke damaged as well when it's outside the refectory. So I suspect he did work in Scotland, but I think most of his working life was down south in London.
I have a couple of comments in the chat room. Shaw was appointed 1583 and died 1602, and Milne the first and second were about comparable in date with Shaw's time. I don't know if there's any connection between the two men. Another question in the chat room: to what extent is your lodge's history an attraction to new members?
We don't want to boast about our history. I think we want to try to concentrate more on the relevance of Freemasonry and its application to society today. Obviously, we're very lucky to have a history, and we're very lucky to have our building as well. But I think we are more trying to attract our members in regards to what we do as Freemasons. It would be very nice if we had some more historians apply to join us. It would be great. But of course, it's a lovely ingredient as being part of Scone Lodge School in Perth to have our history. But we certainly wouldn't use it as a selling point.
There's a comment from Brother Ian McIntosh. John Milne II died 1621, just before the collapse of Perth Bridge. So that's certainly after, well after, it's 20 years after William Shaw.
Right. The Milnes were responsible for building that bridge that collapsed. We didn't put that into the presentation just because we didn't think it was particularly relevant, but it's an interesting point.
Brother Prince is asking, what is the oldest dated document available from your lodge? Was that the mutual agreement, 1658?
1658, and it's held in Edinburgh, actually. It's pretty illegible these days. I mean, we obviously have a lot of photocopies of it, but yeah, it's stored under the correct conditions in Edinburgh.
Mr. Chairman, that's all the questions we have at the moment. Could I hand it back to you?
Thank you, Charles. Can I just add, Brother Alexander, about must be 10 years or so ago, I had the privilege of visiting the George Washington Memorial Museum, just outside Washington, DC. Can't remember exactly the location. And in the tour of the building, it was a young lady, a very well-informed young lady, took us round the building and explained its history. Tremendous. But at one stage, she took us to an altar on which lay a King James Bible, King James Version Bible. And I mentioned to her, did you know that King James VI was a Scot and he was a Mason? And she said, yes, I did know. Every Scot who comes in here tells me exactly that. So I don't know that she knew about Scone and Perth, to be fair, but she did know that King James VI was a Scottish Mason. Are there any other questions then, Brennan? No, again, Alexander, may I, on behalf of the Brethren Assemble, thank you again for an excellent presentation and for your support actor, David Robertson, and for his assistance. Very enjoyable, very educational, very informative. Thank you, sir. You've set the bar high for this second series, because I know there's two, maybe three of the upcoming presentations. The presenters themselves are here this evening, and I'm sure they'll be looking at their presentations just to make sure that they up their game and match what they've seen here this evening. I just wonder if the Grand Master Mason, Brother Ramsey McGee, would like to say something just before we close.
I think you've said it all, John. Very, very enjoyable. Alexander took us from the past into the present and even had a look at the future. And I think the graphics that David put together made a tremendous difference. It made the whole thing so very much more interesting. Tremendous night, and as you say, the bar has been set incredibly high for this, the second series in the presentations. And if they're all of this standard, we certainly look forward to the next one. So very many thanks, Alexander, and thanks to you too, David, for the joint presentation. Absolutely first class. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that. And again, thanks for your continued valued support for this series of presentations. Thank you, sir. Well, our next presentation will be a week this evening. That will be Wednesday, the 16th of September. And on that occasion, Brother David Jack, the Master of the Lodge of Glasgow, St John No. 3 Biz, will undertake his presentation on the history of that fine old lodge, which I have the privilege to be a member. So if there's no further questions or points that anybody would like to make, can I again thank you all for your support this evening. Look forward to seeing you next week. And I might just add again my thanks to Brother Charles Winston and to Brother Gordon Meekie for their technical assistance this evening in making this all happen. Thank you, Brian. So you have a minute or two if you want to say cheerio to anybody on screen there before we close down. But again, thank you, brother, and we hope to see you next Wednesday when we hear the history of the Lodge of Glasgow St John, number 3 Biz, through the good offices of Brother David Jack, the master of that lodge. Thank you, brother.
If you'd like to unmute, brethren, you can have a few minutes to have a conversation.
All being shy.
Brother Alexander, can I then begin by thanking you most sincerely for an absolutely superb presentation this evening, a fascinating glimpse into the history of Scone and Perth, and many congratulations.
Thanks very much, Brother Alexander and Brother Davis, for a very interesting presentation. Take care, brethren.
Right, Martin.
Well done, Alexander. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Very
Look
good.
forward to catching up with everybody. Cheers.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, David.
Fantastic presentation, Alexander. Learnt a lot about me and David's Mother Lodge, and look forward to seeing you all soon, and hope you're all well.
Absolutely, done the lodge. Proud Right Worshipful Master, so well done. Thanks again.
And nice to see a little photo of me in there as well. Take care, everyone.
It was absolutely fabulous, Brother Alexander, to actually be inside the lodge after such a long time, albeit only virtually. So thank you especially for your choice of presentation venue. Much nicer than my own cramped office here in Glasgow.
We look forward to your presentation in just a couple of weeks' time, David. And
oh, don't jinx me! Don't jinx me.
I'm sure it will be top flight. Well done, sir.
Thanks, Brother Alexander and Brother David, for a most enlightening and very enjoyable presentation. Thank you.
Well, Alec Craig, another one of our presenters, towards the end of the month or the beginning of October. In fact, I think, Alec, before you number 6 gets the opportunity, but we'll look forward to that.
I thought you said late 2021, Brother Muller.
I told you it was unstable.
Thank you, brethren. Good night. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you, brother.
Good night, Charles. Thank you.
Good night. Good night, brother.
And
Good night, brother.
Good night.
Good night, brethren.
That was.
night all.
Night. Good night. God bless and take care. Goodbye. Night, brother. Well done, Alexander.
Well done, David. Take it all on your stride, and we'll look forward to your presentation next Wednesday.
No pressure.
None at all. Has Archie Chalmers gone?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just going to congratulate. It's the longest I have ever been in his company without him speaking or interrupting.